Hi, my name is Joseph. I'm a second year at St Anne's studying law with French law, and today we're going to be looking at the obligation to obey and tackling one of the big questions in jurisprudence, whether there is a general moral obligation to obey the laws of a reasonably just legal system. And we're going to have a look at one theory in particular that provides an answer to this question. Now, starting things off with a brief caveat that we are only looking at reasonably just legal systems. None of the theories in this area really get off the ground if we have a society that isn't reasonably just, as they're all premised on there being a fair scheme. So, if we want to answer this question, we need to pin down exactly what we're looking for. So first, what is an obligation? Well, an obligation to do something is a reason to do something. It's a reason to obey. But the obligation that we're looking for has some other requirements. First, it has to be a general obligation. We can't just show that some people have one reason for obeying the law and other people have a different reason. And it's not enough to show that some of us have an obligation to obey all the laws, or that all of us have an obligation to obey just some of the laws. The obligation must be a reason for all of us to obey all the laws all the time. It has to be content independent. This means it must be an obligation to do what the law requires of us simply because it is the law which is telling us to do it, no matter what its content may be. In a sense, it must be an obligation to do what the law says, no questions asked, no matter what the law actually is. It has to be a moral obligation, one that arises out of considerations of right and wrong. So we're not looking for legal reasons like, I don't want to steal because it'll break the provisions of the Theft Act. Finally, it must be a prima facie obligation. Now this means an obligation on its face, at first consideration, but one that can ultimately be outweighed by stronger moral considerations to the contrary. It is always an important factor to consider, but can be outweighed. Few really think that there is an absolute obligation to obey the law that is exclusionary and cannot be defeated by any other stronger moral reasons for action. For example, if you had a sick family member and had to break the speed limit to rush them to hospital or else they'd die. Now, one of the most popular theories put forward in favour of there being such an obligation is Rawls' natural duty theory. According to Rawls, natural duties are moral obligations incumbent upon each of us unconditionally, regardless of the contingencies of whichever society we find ourselves in. They're sort of out there in the ether, imposing themselves upon each and every one of us. Rawls discusses several natural duties, including the duty to help another in need and the duty not to harm one another. But the most important natural duty for us is the natural duty of justice. This comprises the duty to support and comply with the just institutions that exist and apply to us. So based on this theory, Rawls has been able to successfully establish an obligation that is moral, content independent, general, and prima facie. Now, Rawls' theory isn't perfect, and there are several criticisms and alternate theories out there, but hopefully this video has inspired you to go out there and do some reading for yourself and to think about whether you believe that there is a general moral obligation to obey the law.